PAX Unplugged 2024 is now officially in the books, and as always, the convention was awesome. An entire weekend devoted to gaming is definitely something I want to sign up for, and of course, I was able to meet up with some old friends, make some new ones, and as you'd guess, demo a lot of upcoming projects. With that in mind, I wanted to spend some time talking about the ones that I'm most excited about, my pros, my cons, and also thoughts about the convention as a whole. Welcome back, everyone. Fresh off of PAX, or sort of fresh. We're now, at the time of this recording, about a week removed, and there's a few reasons for that. I had attempted some recordings, but unfortunately, in, true Random Thoughts fashion, I lost my voice quite literally the day before the convention, and as you'd imagine, spending an entire weekend having to scream anyway in order to be heard over the roar of the crowd did not do wonders for my voice. I gotta be honest, I may end up doing this particular video in multiple segments because we'll see how yeah, it's not a lie. We've been through a lot of editing at this point. Tired my voice gets. I made a few attempts before, they did not work out. We're putting in the effort though. Now at the outset, I do want to of course give a shout out to a whole bunch of people, including everyone that I was able to meet up with. A lot of people both from games I've playing currently as well as games I played in the past, both devs as well as players and other friends. It was awesome running into everybody, spending some time with everyone, catching up. It's always cool to do that at these conventions. Additionally, speaking of new friends, I wanted to call out there were more than a few people who had recognized my Locked Tomb merch. Whether it was my hat, my various shirts, sweatshirts, whatever, had a number of people come up to me, again, both exhibitors as well as individual convention attendees, that said, hey, I love that book series. If you have not heard of it or you are not familiar with it, I highly recommend this book series. Gothic Space Lesbian Necromancers Discover a Castle is the paraphrased tagline for the first book, and it only gets more insane from there, and I can't wait for the final book in the series. And that's pretty much the sentiment that I got from everyone else as well. Now, with that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the games themselves. There were a bunch that I had tried that were either available immediately, shortly to be available, or are going to be going to Kickstarter, backer kit, that sort of thing in the short to medium term future. I have some thoughts. Again, I demoed these, didn't get a ton of time with them, but I did have the opportunity to sit down and speak with the devs, pick their brains, get some more ideas, and we're going to be talking about a variety of them today. Now, some of these were scheduled and planned. Some of them I just kind of stumbled on as I walked through the con, and I'm glad that I did discover them. But the first one we're going to be talking about is Pocket Paragons Massiverse. This is actually a review copy that was provided to me by the devs. I do want to call that out when they gave me stuff. There were a few devs that either offered it or did give me things. I'll let you know as we go through. But prior to any of this, I did actually purchase for myself a number of other Pocket Paragons products. They have a few different properties associated with them now, and of course, their own original IP. Full disclosure, I did think that this was going to be a different game going in, that the studio, Solace Game Studio, was going to be creating a different game utilizing the Massiverse property, which personally I'm not very familiar with. I was pleasantly surprised that it is within the Pocket Paragon system. What is that? Well, the Pocket Paragon system is a 1v1 dueling card game without any variants. Sort of. So while you have a deck, you will start with your entire deck in your hands. It's less than 10 cards. And it simulates a fighting game and the mind game surrounding a fighting game. The goal, of course, is to reduce your opponent's health to 0, but that is only one of 2 ways to win. The second way to win is through their pseudo rock, paper, scissors system. So let's take a step back for a moment. There's a few different things you need to know. This is intended for 2 players. It is a very, very quick game. The box says 5 to 15 minutes. The reality is you will be playing games in 5 minutes or less, unless you happen to be bantering and you're doing your best luchador impression or something. It is very rules light, but I feel that the depth of strategy is there, and that's very important to me, that especially at the time in my life that I'm at, as I'm getting older, my wife would say very old, I want simple to learn, lifetime to master sort of games. I've always wanted that, but it's underscored now. So returning to the rock, paper, scissors system, the goal for this game is I play an attack face down, you play an attack face down, we flip them up, and then we resolve what they do. Baseline is we will both do damage to each other, and then the cards may have effects. But down at the bottom, you'll notice that there are counters. So for example, orange beats blue, blue beats green, green beats orange. Rock, paper, scissors, right? There are defense cards, but there are also two other types, a rest card and an execute. We'll touch on those momentarily. The idea here is that when you use a card, it goes to your discard. It is exhausted. You don't get those back until you play a rest. When you rest, you scoop all your cards back, put them back in your hand, you keep going. However, if your opponent plays an execute, you immediately kill the person who is resting. It's a pretty interesting way to keep the game always exciting, no matter how far behind you are. You could be at 1 health. It's that magic pixel, if you played fighting games, that you get that big comeback, and suddenly you flip everything on its head and you win the game. Now, some people may not love that, but it does lead to exciting things. That's not all the game offers. There are additional charge-up meter attacks, if you're familiar with that concept from fighting games, where you build up energy and then you can do a super attack. Well, that is introduced via these purple cards, and there's some rules surrounding them. It's very, very simple. You could pick up this game, learn it in less than 5 minutes, and then immediately start throwing punches, throwing hands with whoever you want to play with. I really like this game. Again, they did give me this review copy, but I own several Pocket Paragon sets already. To forgive the background noise, I'm putting it away as I'm talking. I already own several. I've been playing it for multiple years. I've played it at Gen Con and a number of other conventions, and we do pull it out every once in a while. I like the game because while there is the potential for a heavy scene, I think the big thing is you could play this as you were waiting to set up for other more intense games. If you play D&D, you're waiting for somebody to show up, or somebody had to take a break or whatever. Or you're in between rounds at a tournament. You are waiting in a convention line or something. You could carry this with you. The 2 decks will easily, you probably fit several in a standard deck box, especially something commander size. You probably fit almost every set in a commander deck box. The box itself is really cool, and I do appreciate a nice box. I do enjoy this game. I'd recommend picking it up. I'm pretty sure that you could get this at standard retailers like Target, for example. Don't quote me on that, but you can get this pretty cheaply. You can get this, it's plentiful. Find the one that happens to tickle your fancy. All the characters do have a unique play style, so it is worth exploring the other ones if you want different things, but you can certainly stick with one set, play it as a quote-unquote board game, and have a ton of fun. So this is definitely highly recommended by me. I would say check it out. Sticking with card games, we're now going to talk about Obscurids, but instead of a 1v1 dueling card game, we'll call it, we're instead talking about a multiplayer game intended to fit the role of Commander or Twin Suns or Chaos or whatever happens to be your TCG multiplayer experience of choice. Let's take a look at this. Whoop, helps if I hold it right side up. So this is a promo from Obscurids. It is Bigfoot. He is, well, one of the boss monsters, and they did have somebody literally dressed up as this guy throughout the con, which personally I thought was hilarious. This is a game that I did not know of coming into the convention, and I'm glad that I stumbled upon it. So first things first, Obscurids is not currently available. As compared to Pocket Paragons, where you could go out and buy it, you could probably find it on Amazon or whatever. You cannot get Obscurids yet. It is coming to Kickstarter, air quotes, soon, TM. It is intended to be right around the corner, but I will repeat this as we go through. I don't feel comfortable saying, oh, well, the devs told me it's going live on this date. None of them really gave me a date. They all gave me like quarters. But the reality is, if you back Kickstarters before, if you've seen new games, there are things that can come up, and I don't want to back the devs and be like, well, this content creator said that. Not that anybody cares about my content that much. But the point is that I'm going to leave it vague. Should be soon. Keep your eyes out. You can go to their website now and sign up to be notified. So I will point that out. Links for all of this stuff will be in the description of this video. Now, what is Obscurids and what makes it unique and sets it apart from other games? As mentioned before, it is designed for multiplayer. The goal is that the target group is 4 or more players, which is something that is very different. Now, full disclosure, I typically hate these kind of games. I don't mind multiplayer games. but they do great on me. Multiplayer beyond 1v1. And the reason for that, and I'm going to couch all of this discussion in that, is I have played a lot of card games. I've been playing card games since 1994. I started with Magic. I played dozens. And when I say dozens, I'm not exaggerating. We're talking upwards of 50 different card games. I played them single player, like literally it's one person, primarily fighting one person, and then of course various multiplayer variants. And what typically happens is you get bogged down in details, you get bogged down into the politics of the table, and it gets weird. And that's just not the experience I want. And I'm not saying that to insult anybody who's enjoying it. It's more to preface so you understand where I am coming from. And then you can make a decision about Obscurids or some of the other games we're going to talk about. I will say that Obscurids has gone out of their way to try and cure some of those ailments, but it inherently is leaning into them. If you look at their site, and this is quoting from their site, designed for multiplayer, we developed a fresh, modern TCG experience specifically created for 4 or more players. In Obscurids, you'll find unique gameplay, full of strategic depth and lighthearted politics. And I can definitely say from playing the demo that there is going to be a political element to the game. So the idea here is that you start with a boss monster in play. It could be the Rat King, it could be the Kraken, it could be the Moth Queen, it could be Bigfoot, it could be Pico's Bill. You'll understand why I'm emphasizing those 5 to start. There is a deck building element, as in not you're playing a deck builder, but you can construct unique decks. And you bring your monster to the game, and the goal is to score 24 points. You score points by defeating your opponent's boss monsters, the ones you start and play with, and there are other effects that, of course, will generate points over the course of the game. Now, that isn't the only unique aspect, because the boss monsters will actually level up through gameplay, so you become a more threatening monster than you were when you first sat down, which is a cool RPG-esque element to give you these additional powers, these additional strengths, and it is exciting to be, oh, I'm on the cusp if I do this. Well, then that changes. This gets me the immediate level up versus this may be the longer term, more strategic value by either stunting this person's level up, or maybe this gets me closer to the victory, and those decision points, I think, will lead to interesting scenarios. But wait, there's more. There's no player elimination in the game, as compared to other games where, oh, I have a leader or something in play, presumably when it dies, I die. That is not the case. What ends up happening is you start out with 3 health. Presumably other characters will have different health values, but the 5 I mentioned, they have 3 hearts. There are a bunch of stats on the card, but 3 hearts, shocker, 3 health. When you take 3 damage, and the damage is permanent across both these characters as well as the other, when you take enough damage to be defeated, you go face down until the start of your next turn. Not the next turn, but your next turn. This gives you the opportunity to not just get clobbered, because if you played one of these games before, encountered people who are actually trying to win the game as opposed to just do a cool thing, what ends up happening in my experience is that there will often be blood in the water, and if there is any kind of incentive to attack the weakest player, it will be taken, because that simultaneously gives you something and represents the least risk on your part. Given that you score points in this game by damaging and defeating opposing characters, naturally you could see where this would lead to a problem of people just beating up on the weakest player. This gives that player a chance to stage a comeback, as they will start their turn, they'll refresh, they'll be at full health, and they can kind of build up their board once again. Additionally, the lack of player elimination and the fact that you are accruing points instead of taking it away from opposing players means that you do have this engagement from all players throughout the course of the game. Now, the game itself, rules-wise, is fairly simple. If you've played Magic, if you played the WoW TCG, if you played Star Wars Unlimited, if you played any game like that, you're going to pick it up rather quickly. There are instances, there's individual combat, like I choose a guy to attack, it attacks this character of my choice, barring other conditions that allow things to change. Notably, though, characters can attack immediately. The defense system is kind of unique in that untapped or ready or unexhausted characters, you'll have to forgive me for not remembering the term, they must be attacked first, so it has a taunt based system as compared to Magic, where you choose a defender when an attack is declared. But that's pretty much it without getting into the specifics of the cards themselves and the strategy. I will say that I do find the choice of characters amusing. When I saw the guy dressed up as Bigfoot and I saw the big booth standee and stuff, I know I chuckled a little bit and I said, all right, I need to check this out. I need to find out what it is. Oh, it's a card game? All right, yeah, I'm definitely in. Now, as mentioned, these aren't my sort of games. They don't really get to the table. I have multiple TCGs and CCGs that have official or unofficial formats that are very similar to this, because like Commander, you can only have a single copy of each card in your deck. And while I love the idea of these things, the way they play out, I tend to find them very boring. They take too long. It changes what the core of the game is about, and if you are okay with that, I think you're going to want to check out Obscurids. I think there's a lot here to appreciate. I will caveat that with, even in the demo, there were, despite the effort to try and prevent the blood in the water scenario, it still happened. Like, my wife fell behind pretty early, and she was forever behind because she was the easiest target to generate these points and to level up your guy and then become more dangerous and therefore snowball further. And because she was behind, she had difficulty ever getting out from being behind, because either people were all targeting her with removal, which then benefited them because then their attacks were more effective, and it just kind of snowballed from there. That may not be the case once, again, it was the demo deck. 3 of us had never even seen the game before. There are some things that I think are problematic. There are some unique takes on solving other problems. So, for example, instead of having the seemingly more common anything can be a resource system, you technically have another deck of resources. They have a coin-esque mechanic where your first resource on your first turn generates an additional resource. This prevents you from getting mana screw, because every turn you will get a resource and you will continue to be able to play the game, which I think is great. I think it would have been better if they just allowed you to put stuff face down as a resource, but that is my own personal preference. I know other people prefer other gameplay styles. If you enjoy Commander, I would check this out. A notable point about this, probably should have said this in the beginning, in the Kickstarter, there's going to be a fixed distribution that's going to get you 5 decks, namely the 5 that I mentioned: Pico's Bill, the Kraken, Rat King, Bigfoot, and the Moth Queen. These will be playable. It's going to be, and I'm reading it from their site, 200 cards with 5 ready-to-play decks. You can mix and match things. There are ways to have deck building. They're going to have different non-rotating formats for this. They're going to have a number of different ways to play. There are going to be additional boosters. I don't love that, but I think as a board game-esque experience, which this, for me, this sort of thing is important to have as a board game format where, hey, everybody's coming over, we want to play some cards, we're going to do a multiplayer game. It's easier to just say, hey, I played Rat King last time, Kraken looked fun, let me try the Kraken deck. And then you just kind of leave it where it is, and you don't have to worry about, anybody hyper optimizing things, or if they want to play the same deck so they can get familiar with it, they know what the cards are in there. It's not a rotating format. It's not all this stuff. You can get attached to things, and I like that. The boosters are cool. We'll see how that plays out and what the distribution's like, that sort of thing. But like I said, while I may not like Obscurids, I am heavily considering getting it anyway, because a fixed distribution box like that, I can probably make work with my gaming groups. And I also just love the theme. This cryptid thing that people are kind of touching on here and there, it's something that I think has a lot of legs, or potential for a lot of legs, because I've had this discussion a lot on stream, but if you aren't a property-based game, it is extremely difficult to make a breakthrough, and at least these are recognizable characters. Like, most people have heard of Bigfoot, and it's good that they chose that. Or most people have heard of the Kraken. Maybe some of the other characters you may not be as familiar with, but at least there is a Bigfoot in the door that will allow you to, as the game devs, get that mind share. Because otherwise it's just, hey, I'm generic high fantasy game number 7 billion. And it's tough to get through that. But like I said, definitely check this out. You can check the link in the description. Speaking of fixed distribution, we have another card game, and this is Fable's End. I'm not doing a good job of displaying the cards, but we'll get them up there in editing. Future me, handle that. So Fable's End is well, it's not a CCG, it's fixed distribution. So it is a very unique game that I have actually seen at PAX in the past, and it is very close to release at this particular point in time. Notably, there is also, and this is important for me personally, because I love card games, and this will come up as a repeated theme within the discussion about Fable's End. This is going to have a digital client, which I think is awesome. Don't get me wrong, I love shuffling cards, I love playing card games, but at the end of the day, it is more expensive to play a physical card game than a digital one, generally speaking, for a variety of reasons, and not the least of which is having to buy more sleeves and binders and boxes and dividers and all this stuff. This saves a little bit. However, I will say that Fable's End introduces some rather unique components, some rather unique both design elements as well as just general card game ideas that I personally find fascinating. I've mentioned it on stream, which of course you can check the link for that in the description. I kind of collect card game rulebooks, and that sounds a little silly. But as someone who's played card games as long as I have, I do find it fascinating how card games solve certain inherent questions. What are those questions? Well, how do I play cards? How do I win the game? How do I fight my opponent's stuff? How do I defend myself? And all of these are core, basic, axiomatic things, but entirely set the flavor and the experience with something as simple as, well, I have a card in my hand, how do I play it? And I think Fable's End takes some unique liberties that really exemplify the creativity that is possible with card games. Now, this is intended to be a 1v1 card game. There's a variety of different things going on. I will say that because of the uniqueness of this game, it does increase the level of complexity. That isn't inherently a bad thing, but if you are looking for simple to learn, lifetime to master, this one stretches that a significant amount. For example, there are minimum 3 ways to attack each turn. You could attack your opponent's hand, you could attack your opponent's stuff, as in their creatures, we'll call them, their minions, their units, whatever, or you could attack their story. And if you're confused already, believe me, there's a whole lot more to talk about. The goal in Fable's End is to push your opponent above a certain skull threshold. So we'll switch back to me momentarily. You can see on the backs of the cards, there's a little, kind of turned the right way. See that little skull there that has a 1? It's a little bit out of focus, but we'll put better images on screen from their stuff. And there are skulls on each of the cards. It's a 1 on the back because there are times when a card will go to certain areas face down. As compared to on the front with the Mobius whale here that has a 3 for the skulls. So it's a 1 when it's face down, and it's a 3 when it's face up. Whoever has 20 or more skulls loses the game. The other way to win the game is a player adds a 7th shield to their phalanx, which is directly related to your resource system. I know, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you. If you're confused, feel free to check out the rulebook. It is available on their site literally right now, and as mentioned, there's a digital client, which I believe is very important due to the complexity of this game. I think it's both a great teaching tool, and there's a lot of bookkeeping that happens over the course of the game that is better tracked by a machine. Now, beyond that, there's a lot going on the cards. As you can see, there's a huge number of, numbers, as well as different icons and things going on. It is a lot to take in, and I don't want to go too far into the specifics. As mentioned, you can check out the rulebook online. Demo was actually very fun. It was scripted so that we could run through and get through all of the different things because there are a lot of different components. But the things I want to call out that I think are rather unique are the resource system. As compared to having dedicated resource cards that are, their lands, their quests, their locations, there's just random tokens, they're just a counter that goes up. In this case, it's directly related to the shields and your phalanx. And the idea here is that you cannot play a card whose cost, rank, however you want to look at it, is greater than the number of open shields you have. So what does that mean? Well, basically, if you play a big high-cost guy and you want to play another one, you may not be able to because you just literally don't have enough space to support the guy. Think of it more as a food economy. If you're playing an RTS or something, in order to get the supply that you need more shields, farms or supply depots, You must construct additional pylons. And that influences deck building because it encourages you to then have a range, a spectrum of different costs involved. Beyond that, there's also a rock, paper, scissors based system. It's exactly what it sounds like. The sword replaces scissors, so parchment, I guess, should be paper. One of them will get an advantage over the other based on the types, assuming applicability, and it can influence how different combats and different plays work. Talking about more things that units can do, they can be rushed into play. And that means that they get this temporary attack for likely a lower attack value, but it does allow you to do things with the unit that you may not have been able to otherwise. Point being is that there's a lot of components in this game that allow you a huge amount of decision points. We didn't even talk about attacking stories. These are tied to your deck, which I'm calling attention to because as compared to having disenchant effects where it's I have to have this card to deal with this type of card, and then I have this type of card to deal with this type of card. You can just attack pretty much anything in this game. You could attack their story and remove it. You can attack their guys and remove it. Assuming that you can sneak through their phalanx, so the physical setup for your grouping of units called the phalanx matters. And if your character is too big to fit through your opponent's phalanx, aka they have enough defenders, you cannot attack your opponent's hand, but assuming you can attack their hand directly. If this sounds like Netrunner to a degree, I don't think you're too far off base. And as I went through the demo and as I've been thinking about it afterwards, I'm seeing a lot of these elements. I didn't ask the devs if that was on their mind when they were designing the game. I was more focused on other things that we're going to talk about momentarily, but I bring all this stuff up to stress the depth and complexity of this game. And I do think that I am personally going to lean into the digital client more than physical. However, because of the fixed distribution, I may end up buying a physical box set anyway, and hopefully be able to explain it to everyone. I anticipate, for me personally, although this is a dueling game, aka 1v1, it is, and therefore way more likely to make it to the table, the reality is the complexity may make it so that I don't get to play it that often or honestly at all. And I'm not saying that as a knock to the game. It is just my personal situation. You'll have to judge for yourself if you take a look at the 32-page rulebook, whether you feel this will be appropriate for your group or not. Now, circling back to the digital client, it is going to end up on Steam. There is a rough time frame for it. Again, I'm not going to throw out specifics here because it was given to me as a, like, well, we're targeting this. So we'll see how that plays out. But there is going to be a full play set in these fixed distribution boxes, which is music to my ears. And they will have some premium cards, so that way you can bling things out if that is what you prefer to do. I don't really care. I care about game pieces and making sure that I have all the stuff, but that is going to be an option at some point. Now, personally, I really do like this game. The digital component is what's drawing me in. I love the ideas that are present here. I do wonder if this is becoming is a curiosity for me simply because of my interest in game design elements and how unique and how many fresh ideas are brought by this game. The challenge, of course, not to beat the dead horse, but the reality is that there's a lot of complexity to this game. There's a lot of things to track, whether your cards are face up or face down, because you do get to flip some of them as part of the normal turn sequence besides the actual effects. Do I play this card normally? Do I play it rushed? Did I make sure that I did my cleanup step properly? Because that happens every turn. Your characters don't necessarily stay out all the time, even outside of getting removed by cards or combat. There's a standard step in the turn that removes them from play. You have the shield tracking. Oh, do I actually block their phalanx? Or is their phalanx blocking me when I want to attack? Where do I attack? Do I trigger this effect, that effect? These are all things that come up in card games, but there are additional layers provided by Fable's End, which that may be music to people's ears. If you feel that the current state of card games has gone too far in the direction of making things simple and, trying to cater to people who are not dedicated card game players, Fable's End is a godsend to you. I think if you are if you are a neophyte and you are just picking up card games, this is like not jumping in the deep end. This is like jumping in the Marianas Trench to a degree. I think that there is a level of complexity that will be daunting, but that is in no way, shape, or form bad. I like this game. I'm looking forward to it. I do plan on picking it up and or streaming it. Well, definitely streaming it at some point. We'll have to see how it goes. I hope that it does well. Truthfully, like, the game looks cool. It looks like a lot of fun. I think the art is fun. I think there's a lot of great things about it. So we shall see. May have to take a break after this one because my voice is starting to go. But next game up is Vast Grim Plunderlust. This is another game that I did get something physically for. These are the backs. These are the fronts. We're going to talk about this. This is by Creature Curation. There were actually a number of signs that it sounds like there's a RPG as well. This is an expandable card game in the Dying Universe. Fight your way through derelict starships and stations as raider crews plundering for survival. This deck that I received they didn't give this to me. I bought it. It was like $10. It was sight unseen. I never heard of this before. I said, oh, it's a card game. Oh, it can be played solo and it can be played multiplayer. It's $10. All right, I'll impulse buy that. I thought there's something personally. There's something about the neon blue and pink that is very amusing to me. I really like that color aesthetic, even though I think it's like eye bleeding to a degree. And that really caught my eye. You could see the booth from like a mile away if it wasn't for all the other booths being super tall as well. And it looked really cool. I like the premise. I like the aesthetics. So I'm like, you know what? For an impulse buy, we'll try it, especially since it's a card game that I could play solo. Maybe I could stream it. Maybe I could record videos about it, whatever. I didn't realize until after I bought it that it is a 45-minute expected play time, 1 to 7 players, and then 14 plus seems to be both for theme as well as complexity, to be honest. I think once I play this a few times, I will have a better handle on it. I did try and play a few games. There are a few complaints that I have without completing a full single game. So if you look at the cards, I'm going to show you one here and then I'll put up some better ones. This is a murder bot. This is one of the monsters, I know. But you can tell there's like a bunch of stuff going on here. And remember how earlier I was saying that my opinion on card layout, the UI, for lack of a better way to put it, has been kind of parabolic. I'm at that other end of the parabola where I really want things to be as simple as possible. The other thing is, and I'm not surprised by this because it is a solo experience, at least as part of the game, that there are dice involved. And if you've watched this channel before, you know how I feel about dice. I don't like them. Spoiler alert. And that'll come back up in another game. So it sounds like there are a lot of knocks against this game, but I do want to try this. I do want to give it a fair shake. I think aesthetically, as I said, I love the aesthetics. I love the way the art is. I don't mind the card UI, the layout that much, because it does remind me of like 90s era card games, which I'm sure is very much intended. My concern is, and again, it will take multiple playthroughs to really get the handle down or get a handle on the rules. And you can go to their website now, Unrefined Rulebook Rules PDF version 1.0. I think that kind of says something. My concern is going to be, especially with any of these solo games, until you really know it inside and out, how many games are you playing where you just ignored a rule and it completely changed the way you play the game? When you have multiple players, 2 or more, I think it's easier to just be like, someone will just catch it and go, wait, aren't we supposed to do this? Well, wait, doesn't that card say that? Or what about this scenario? Or how does this interact with that? And then, okay, even if you pause and go look it up, at least you're collectively finding an answer. If you're on your own, it's very easy. It's like, remember writing a paper in school? You never found your own spelling mistakes. There's a reason for that, because your brain fixes the holes. Or you just missed it. And I think that will happen here, but that is, the risk of playing a solo game. And that's fine. I'm very curious about this game. I wanted to call it out, even though I haven't put a lot of time into it, because it was cool looking. I think that it's worth checking out if you have the opportunity, especially because, like I said, it was like $10 or $12. And if nothing else, they have apparel and art print and stuff on their site for this universe and stuff. I don't know. Like, it looks cool. I want to put more time into it. That's the bottom line. Next up is actually a board game. Believe me, I didn't only play card games this weekend, although it does have cards, but whatever. Semantics. So we're talking about Evolution: A New World. Excuse me. We're talking about Evolution: Another World. This is a board game that actually released this year. It's supposed to be for 1 to 4 players. I don't know how you would play this game solo. And I imagine that playing 1v1 heads up is not going to be a very engaging experience. I think the target is really 3 to 4 players, because you do need other players to get involved, or you're going to end up with probably a snowball situation, in my opinion. The idea here is you want to ascend. I forget the term for the game, but basically you want to score 3 points by getting your characters to a certain level, and then they get removed from the table and you score a point. First person to transmute, that's the term in game. Transmute 3 creatures wins the game. While you can attack other players, and that is a core component, there isn't really removal. There isn't really elimination. So as a result, this is intended, and you can tell by the cutesier art, this is intended to be a more family-friendly game. And I played the other games in the Evolution series, and I think this is a good take on trying to slim down the rule set and make it much quicker to play. You're certainly much quicker to set up. We had actually taken this out of, because I wanted to look at it. I saw it on the floor. We didn't get to demo it. So we went over to the PAX Games library to look at this. And I've never done that before, so I didn't know how it worked. It was actually way simpler than I thought, which was really cool. So we pick the game up, we sit down, we unbox it, we start playing. And we had some fun. I think if this was like a $20 game, this would be good. I don't actually know the MSRP for this. Future me. Not future me. I just paused and looked it up on Amazon. It's $35 on Amazon right now. I feel like this is a $20 to $25 game from a gameplay experience. It is probably $35 due to components and cost and all that kind of stuff. Like, $35 is not going to... I'm not going to balk at that and go, there's no way this thing is worth $35. The problem is I think for the experience that I would get, the number of plays that I would get out of it, it's probably only going to be about $20 worth. And that probably doesn't mean a lot to everybody out there, but I do kind of gauge games based on, well, how much money would I be willing to pay for this experience and or experiences if I'm going to play it multiple times. I expect this would probably get to the table a couple of times. Maybe one person out of my group would enjoy it enough to ask for it again, but I don't think it's going to blow anyone away. It's definitely a fun game. If you want a competitive multiplayer game that isn't like super cutthroat, probably a game that you would, again, use as a filler. You'll play this when you're all meeting up at somebody's house and you're waiting for other people to get there because it plays in 20 minutes to a half hour. Maybe faster, maybe slower, depending on analysis paralysis, that sort of thing. I think it's worth checking out. This was enjoyable, but I don't know. I did want to buy it, but I do have a problem with just stacking up my board game collection, so take that as you will. This next game probably doesn't need me to talk about it because odds are, person watching this, you've heard of this game, you may have even played it and already made a decision about it, but that's Dice Throne. Remember earlier when I said I was going to talk about dice and how I don't like dice? Well, I don't like dice, and I had somebody at a Star Wars Unlimited tournament. We finished our game. I was playing, after I played them, we were just talking about stuff. PAX was upcoming, they were going, and they had said, oh, well, what are you excited about? And I told them, and I said, what are you excited about? And they go, well, I want to play Dice Throne. I'm like, oh, I've seen that game, but I hate dice games. Can you tell me about it? And the first thing he says is it's competitive Yahtzee. And I'm like, that sounds as though that is the worst thing I've ever heard. That might be the worst thing I've heard today. And we laughed, and I'm like, no, but seriously, that sounds terrible. And then he explained it to me, and he started selling me on it. So I made it a point to demo this game. I demoed it, and then we also took this out of the game library later on and played it ourselves. And I like it. It's not bad. I don't know that I would be willing to play in a competitive event for it, because I think 3 or 4 matches of poor dice rolls in a row and I'm going to scream. But it is kind of competitive Yahtzee. The way this game works is you want to reduce your opponent's life total to 0. You start with a board and a card. The board will explain all of your attacks. So picture Yahtzee. You roll the dice. You roll, I think it's 5 or 6 dice. I hit a 1 through 6. Okay, well now I have a straight, which allows me to do this attack. Or I could re-roll up to 2 more times and try and get these other attacks, which will all have different effects. Obviously, the easier to achieve mathematically, however the dice are, because each of the characters have their own stuff, those will do less damage or have weaker effects, whereas the ones that are more difficult to collect will then do more. Shocker. Additionally, each character has their own reference card, which will provide a whole lot of different effects, because there's tons of tokens and either permanent or temporary effects that you can put status effects on yourself, your opponent, trigger different things, and you just kind of go back and forth until somebody dies. There are ways to interact on your opponent's turn. There are defensive rolls. There are a few other things. In each case, they all seem relatively balanced. I spoke with a number of people who seemed to, based on, even though they were doing the demo, they clearly have played Dice Throne before and they knew a little bit about it, that most of them seem to have relatively balanced matchups. It's not, oh, well, you're playing this character and I'm playing this one. One of us auto wins and one of us auto loses, which is good. And of course, there's always the element of, hey, you're rolling dice, even if it is a quote-unquote auto loss matchup. If they roll poorly and you roll well, you're going to win anyway. That could be good or bad, depending on your perspective. There's some cool characters. They have their own properties. So, like, the demo was some Western gunslinger versus a samurai, and they had a ninja character that I saw, and a whole bunch of others. They also had a Santa versus Krampus set, which I thought was really awesome. They have a Marvel set. They have an X-Men set. A whole bunch of properties. Aside from the dice, though, one of the big issues I had with this was the price. I don't recall what the Santa vs. Krampus set was, but it was less costly because there were less characters. But the box set for a season was about $100. Now, if you're out there playing board games, you play card games, that's probably not going to really set up any red flags for you. Many board games are way pricier than that. Card games certainly are. Just like, it's going to cost you more than $100 to get one deck, let alone if you want multiples. And in this, if you get the box set, it's going to provide you multiple characters, and then aside from just learning one and mastering it, the different interactions from different characters and the quantity of characters, definitely, again, to me, the $100 is a lot for this kind of game. But I can absolutely see where the $100 is worth it. The box has the value there. I just don't know if this would get to the table enough. I think when I played it with my family, it was, hey, we like this, but we're probably only going to play it like 3-4 other times. I don't think this game would hit the table a ton. I could see myself playing it again, though, and I definitely would go so far as to say if someone else had it, I would not say no to playing it. I don't think I want to add it to my collection, although I want to add it to my collection. I don't think I will because, as mentioned, I have this stack of board games and card games that I haven't even gotten through, and I can't keep adding to it. Let's not be ridiculous. I can't just get everything. However, I do think this game is cool. I think there is a level of depth and strategy that you may not recognize initially. It's like, oh, it's a dice game. It's got to be all luck. I don't think it is. I think between the cards that allow you to manipulate things, the inherent abilities to manipulate dice, either, again, through the cards or other abilities, just the re-rolls, allow you to manipulate the odds in your favor to, if not get the perfect thing that you want, something reasonable, so that way you are able to continue playing the game and instead not end up in this, all right, I'm playing Yahtzee and I just can't roll the thing I need. which I think is great because dice games are inherent variants, but this seems to solve a lot of that in an interesting way. Plus, it has cool art, cool characters. I definitely like it. I would recommend it if you haven't checked it out. Take a look at it. Maybe try and get somebody to, if someone else owns it, play it, see if you like it. I think it's a cool game. Speaking of cool games, we're going to talk about Rat Trap Games and Battleground Fantasy Warfare. This is one that I had seen as I was walking through the exhibitor hall, didn't know what it was, went by and said, oh, that's really cool. I'd love to come back and do a demo. And they're like, yeah, sure, come back. And then throughout the weekend, I never could get over there. And then I finally did on Sunday, and I'm glad that I did. The idea here is that it's a minis game without minis, which, okay, does that defeat the point? Not quite. You have a deck of cards that represents your army. You play on a board similar to how you would with a actual minis game. Instead of having like all the setup, you can certainly put out terrain and stuff via other cards. They told me, oh, well, we could teach you the game in 2 minutes. And they literally did. It was incredibly simple. Yes, there's additional stuff. There's a lot of things on the cards to track because it is a minis game. Like, there's morale for troops. There's, of course, their speed, their attack, their health, their range, their this, their that. But all of them are kind of self-explanatory if you have any familiarity at all with minis games, with card games, or both. The big issue for this for me, and the reason that I did not pick it up, after we completed the demo, it was myself and a couple other people. And we're like, oh, this is really cool. And the person doing the demo was explaining, oh, well, these are the armies that we have available, and we're expecting these, and blah, blah, blah. And the other people I was with beat me to the punch and said, okay, well, how long does the game take? Because the entire demo took less than 5 minutes. Like I said, the rules explanation, and it was very easy to grok, was sub 2 minutes. And the other 3 were just talking about the game. How long does the game take? And he said, well, for something this size, and I believe we had 5 units on board each. I was dwarves, they were goblins, and the combat was explained with my dwarven footmen or whatever versus their goblin wolf riders. Well, for a game this size, it would take about 2 hours. And in my head, it was like, okay, that's just not going to happen. And that may not be a problem for you. I call this out because for me, similar to the multiplayer card game discussion, I need games that play in 20 to 30 minutes. Beyond that, it needs to be incredibly engaging to justify that sort of time investment. I don't play minis games now for a variety of reasons, but among them is they just take too long to both set up and play and then break down afterwards. For this particular game, I think you could, the setup is very simple. The rules are very simple. The playing of the game, there's a reason that it takes that long because there is the depth and the strategy, but I just can't justify a game that takes that long. If that is not a problem for you, check this out because I think this was really cool. Like I said, it's a very quick thing. It was definitely on the cheaper side. So if you want to play a specific type of game, namely a minis game, but you don't want to sit there and paint all the minis or collect all the minis, and believe me, they are pricey, I would check this out. This was actually really cool. And I wish I could get it to the table, but I just know for my own logistical problems it wouldn't happen. However, sticking with the minis game plan, we are going to be talking about another minis game, and that's Malediction. Now, this is, as mentioned, another minis game, but there's also a deck. And the deck influences when you can deploy things, what spells you have access to, and other actions over the course of the game. But the deck is exceptionally small, so it's pretty deterministic from that end. The idea here is that you have seekers who are trying to, do their thing in the lore. You can check out the website for all the actual lore for it. I will say that this is another booth. It was a very impressive booth. They had all 3D printed or professionally made minis for the game, and believe me, it looked spectacular. Everything looked cool, and it's hard to walk past it and not go, wow, that looks awesome. Let me check that out. I was able to sit down and play a demo with one of the devs, and one of the other things I will call out is that the devs are passionate. That's not to say that any of the other ones I spoke with weren't. And they all were, for sure. They've been working on their passion projects for a while. But I think it is important to point out that you can tell when a dev really loves their game. And this was one of those scenarios where they were just excited to tell me about these things. Maybe they have a very practiced pitch, and this is all a lie, but they seemed very genuinely excited to tell me like, oh, but we have this cool feature that no other game is doing. Let me tell you about it. Oh, and then later on, we have this other cool feature that no other game is doing, but we're not there yet. I'll tell you about it in a minute. And it's just it was an infectious excitement about the game itself that really sold me on it. I mean, I was kind of sold on it anyway, because I thought the minis looked cool, and I thought the game played really well. Notably, the box that this is going to come in will provide standees, like little cardboard standees. You'll get the STL files to print the minis themselves, but you aren't getting minis. So you can play the game, but if you want those higher end pieces, you want the way cooler stuff, that is not part of the base game. The goal of the game, as is the case with many minis games, is to amass a certain amount of victory points. You can do that through a number of ways, all the kind of things that you'd expect. You could off your opponent's units, you could collect the relics that are a core component of the gameplay, including those relics play in because they will give you access to additional cards. Remember, you have that rather small, compared to card games, deck that you have access to that allows you to deploy, impact a battle in other ways, but these other relics can give you other options. Of note, there is a print-and-play version that's available on their website literally right now. I just checked it out. This kind of fits what I'm looking for in that it plays in about 30 minutes, and I love the idea of minis games, but the length of time has always been a problem. This might be my answer. Now, the dark fantasy setting may be off-putting to people, but I personally think it's really cool. And there's an undead faction, so I'm in already. I definitely recommend checking this one out. A link, of course, will be in the description, along with all the other games that I'm talking about. After cards and minis, we're going full back into card games, and that is Onslaughter. This is one of the games that I had set up an interview in advance because I was very excited about this game, and I did not come away disappointed. This game is being developed by a single individual, and shout out to Talia for this because I've talked about my own game design attempts, and watching someone who is solo do this and actually get this out to market is inspiring, to be completely blunt. So this is really cool. What is Onslaughter? It is a competitive 1v1, although there is a multiplayer option, card dueling game. Again, I'm using the term dueling not because the game describes it that way, but because I've found that is the easiest way to describe to people when it's you and me fighting it out. There are a variety of different parts for this game that I want to call attention to, partially because I think that it combines a ton of awesome mechanics from other games and creates what I'll call the best stew, where you're just taking all of these awesome mechanics or ideas and combining them into a single game while adding your own parts. However, there are specific things that I think are going to rub people the wrong way, and we'll talk about them momentarily. But I will call out also at the beginning that I found in talking to Talia, who is a very accomplished card game player themselves, multiple world championships, it sounds like, in other games, as well as an extensive repertoire. It's like, oh, that's a cool idea, and that's a really cool mechanic, and this also works really well. And you kind of dump them in this pot, and you end up with a game that is greater than the sum of the parts, and the parts were all awesome going in. It's intended to be 1v1, but you can play up to 4 players. We're looking at a 30-minute gameplay time frame for 1v1. To meet my criteria, that works. And the theme is a monstrous combat. Now, this is getting pulled from their backer kit page. That's actually not live yet, but will be going live soon. One other thing I want to call out at the beginning is that this is design complete. I've back some Kickstarters, I'm sure people out there as well, where the game, it's like, oh, that looks like it's a finished game, and then you back it, and then you hear from the devs, oh, it's not actually done, we still need to do a bunch of testing, and then suddenly the game will end up morphing over time into something else. Maybe good, maybe bad, whatever. This one is design complete, so what needs to be done is the card layout, as in how it physically looks, and art. Everything else is done, which is actually really cool, and again, very impressive to be done entirely by a single individual up to this point. So what is different about Onslaughter? Well, a lot of things. The resource system is different. The way you win is different. The individual mechanics are different. And we're going to talk about some of the highlights from this. So there are 4 different factions. Each of the factions have their own identities, which are, we're not saying like, oh, well, this faction has an identity of this. They have leaders, heroes, champions, whatever, and they're called identities in the game. Onslaughter has an interesting resource system. Each turn you have a single resource. This allows you to play powerful cards and effects, or you can of course activate abilities that don't necessarily require that action point. This may sound similar to the Epic card game, or the action economy may feel reminiscent of the Transformers TCG, Lightseekers, and a number of others. Whereas those games do kind of run into the issue of granularity. You can't have a card that does 5 damage and then make a card that does 6 damage, because the 6 damage card is just strictly better. Why would I ever use this other card? Onslaughter utilizes a deck construction rule to limit what you have access to. On each of the cards there will be a point value, and these points are going to drive what you can or cannot include in your deck. If you played Gwent, think about that, where it was able to limit the construction of the deck and therefore modify power levels, allowing you to still maintain this sort of action-based economy, but simultaneously introducing some interesting deck building decisions, certainly beyond, well, big number better. Another important component of Onslaughter is the integrated turns. If you played Star Wars Unlimited or even the old Verse TCG, you'll know what I mean. While initiative alternates baseline rather than players claiming it, this turn structure means that as each player advances the game, the other player will have an immediate opportunity to react to their opponent's actions. This more closely ties games together and avoids solitaire scenarios where you're doing your thing on your turn, I'm doing my thing on my turn, and it's a race to see who can be the least interactive. Another element of Onslaughter which is exciting me is the idea of starting or setup cards. This extremely, in my opinion, underutilized element in card games was seen in another favorite game of mine, and that's Magi Nation Duel. These setup cards begin the game in your hand and add a layer of consistency which ensures that the most crucial part of the game, the beginning, is smoothed out for everyone involved. Speaking of smoothing out the early game, while I am personally not a big fan of the Lorcana card game, they do have a really strong mulligan, and Onslaughter is implementing something very similar. Specifically, when you mulligan, you set aside a number of cards, draw that many, then shuffle the cards that you had set aside into your deck. This ensures that you're not redrawing the identical cards back into your hand when you wanted to get rid of them to begin with. That's a lot of selling points for Onslaughter in my opinion. So what are the issues? There are 2 main ones, at least in my mind. The first is the inherent competitiveness. From the outside looking in, and of course a brief demo, this feels kinda like Flesh and Blood, a card game that's designed by card gamers for card gamers, and that may turn some people off. The second problem really is the larger one, and that is the way you win in Onslaughter is through life decking. What's that? Well, there's no external life total or lore count or other points related thing. Your deck is your life. When you take a wound, 1 damage, you either have to discard a card or discard the top card of your deck. I was talking this game up to somebody at my local game store. I was there playing another game, Star Wars Unlimited particularly, and they sounded really excited. And they're like, okay, so how do you win the game? And I'm like, well, it's a life decking game, and you can choose either from your deck or from your hand. And they go, I don't like that. And why don't they like that? They don't like that because they chose to put the cards in their deck. I want to use them. I don't want to lose those cards. The irony is this player typically plays mill in Star Wars or in other games, so that irony can be pretty ironic, but I get the point. That can be problematic and be a showstopper for a lot of people. I personally like the idea, but remember when I was referencing that this is going to be a Flesh and Blood-esque game? I anticipate as a result, although this is saying that it's 30 minutes, I wouldn't be surprised if these are really almost always around 30 minutes or even a little longer, because you're going to go through that process. And there will be these agonizing decisions and analysis paralysis of, I know I'm never getting this card back, or it's unlikely I get this card back. Can I afford to lose it? And until you played a bunch of games, it's going to be challenging to determine that, thereby elongating the process. I expect this game will absolutely make it to my table, because full disclosure, I will be backing this game. I will 100% be buying this. There's no two ways about it. I walked away from the interview with Talia so excited about this game. I would have bought it on the spot right there. If it was available and it was sitting on the table, I 100% would have bought it. It will make it to the table if I have to force it. And the problem is, I'm just hoping that everybody else can see past the life decking piece. It's been a long time since I played life decking games. If you call all the way back to the Decipher Star Wars game, that's a life decking game. And the complaints that are leveled against the system are valid. I don't have a problem with those particular elements, but I know lots of people will. So that's something you're going to have to decide for yourself whether it is something that you can live with. I highly recommend checking this out. Again, it is a fixed distribution model. You will end up getting everything you need. You can build your own decks. They are not set in stone. Obviously, as mentioned, there is a multiplayer potential if you'd rather do that. I think the game is relatively easy to pick up. So similar to the simple to learn, lifetime to master adage, we'll say, that I was mentioning earlier, I think this fits that criteria, certainly more so than some of the other games that I looked at on the weekend, and I'm hoping that it does well. That's Onslaughter, and like I said, I'm very much looking forward to it. Swinging to the complete other end of the spectrum, at least as far as theme goes, from Onslaughter, we're going to be looking at Vibes, which is quite clearly intended for a younger audience. It's a collectible card game, not a fixed distribution model. We'll be talking about that. Now, this game, I didn't know it existed. I happened to stumble on it as I was walking past the booth for one of my local game stores, actually, and they will be one of the retailers that is going to carry this game, and they were selling it on site. We're going to talk about that also. So in Vibes, the goal is to score a certain number of points. How do you score points? Well, it's the number of permanents that you have in play. So you count your penguins, you count your resources, they're called rods in this game, and when you hit a certain threshold, you win the game. There are some unique elements from a card gaming perspective that I'm going to call out here that could make the game for you, even if you're just not super invested in the IP or whatever. I think it's interesting from a card game perspective, and it may just be my obsession with learning card game rules and card game design that is driving this. So bear with me. First of all, it is a game where any card can be a resource. Like I said, they are your rods. You just put them face down. Turns are taken together. Whoever has the Baron, which presumably is a character, important character in the lore, they get to take the first action on each turn. We alternate. If you have the Baron, you will play your penguins. Then I will play my penguins. Then you will play actions. Then I will play actions. Penguins are played by tapping. It's flopping. It's not tapping. It's flopping. Exhausting. Forgive me, I don't remember the term. Your rods. You put the penguin into play. Then the actions are played by leveraging the penguins in play. So they will say you need 3 yellow penguins to play this card, or 8 purple penguins, or whatever the cost happens to be, to play the action. You flop the penguins to play the actions. I realized that was not very clear. After we alternate those 2 phases, we then go to the vibe check, which is the combat for this game. Similar to Pokemon or Neopets or a lot of other games that are focused at these younger audiences, it kind of funnels everything into a single combat step. The vibe check, I choose a penguin, you choose a penguin, we compare the number, and then whoever has the larger number wins. Nobody dies, though. The only way to remove penguins is if something explicitly says it ices a penguin, which I have to admit I thought was hilarious. That's actually really funny to me. But you ice the penguins to remove them. They don't get removed inherently by the vibe checks. So let's say I win the combat. I take the top card of my deck, put it into my rods, and ramp my resources, and ramp my victory condition. You, as the loser of combat, get to draw a card, increasing, obviously, your card selection. This is a cool way to try and tackle this. But it does bring up some concerns, because as we were playing the demo, and again, it was just a quick demo. I did a demo, then I brought my wife and son over. They tried it. They did a quick demo. And at the end of the day, I'm a little concerned about the ramp, because the person who was winning kind of just never lost. They were able to just vomit their hand on the board and get way, way ahead. And then because they were able to put more penguins into play, that meant they were able to play more actions or better actions and continue that advantage. Is that true over the course of the game overall? That's up for debate. I don't really know. But the reality is that there is some risk there. However, the combat system is pretty cool. The win condition is also very interesting, because it is not trying to, we're not trying to kill our opponent. We're not trying to reduce their score. And it is based on permanence that hypothetically, if you play enough cards that ice penguins, you can interact with your opponent's life total, their win condition, directly that way. So definitely a unique take and a different angle on playing card games. Now, will the IP work for you? Maybe, maybe not. If you're looking for a card game to play with a younger audience, your kids, little nieces and nephews, something like that, this might be the target. But there are a few other things you may want to know. One is that there is going to be a digital client, and it's supposed to be launching Q4 this year. So I think it's already available, truth be told. And I definitely want to be streaming it. I'm going to give it a shot because I love playing different card games. I want to learn more about the card pool to see if my fears are founded or not. The other thing that is a somewhat nitpicky thing, but I've mentioned it for other games, and this is the one that really drove that idea home and then caused me to comment on for other games. The fact that there is no text box is driving me insane. You could hand wave the simplicity of the card UI, the card frame, and I don't think that's the end of the world. The nameplate, the subtitle, the type line, whatever. The big issue for me, the fact that there is no text box, a number of the card effects and the actual text end up bleeding into the art almost to the point of being invisible. And given that there are cards that are textless, they just have no effects, they're just vanilla penguins, makes this somewhat of a problem. Is it the end of the world? No, because after a while you're going to know all the cards and then you're just going off the art or whatever. But it does bother me that you can't see it on the baseline cards. I have no problem with textless cards or ones that minimize the text box, who have extended art or whatever. But in this case, there are cards that it's just plainly difficult to identify it, and the font is very small in real life. So it was very easy to overlook the text on certain things. That's kind of a problem for me personally. It's not the end of the world. Overall, I think this game is cute. I don't know how the distribution is going to go. As I mentioned, one of my local game stores, shout out to Top Deck Games. I go there for a lot of other games, and I've been going to them for years. They are among like one of only a handful of retailers that will be carrying it. I think there was mention that Star City was going to. I don't remember if they said Team Covenant. I may be conflating that with a different game, but they didn't have anything but booster boxes available on site, no starters, which is something that was an oversight, obviously. Like, most people are going to want to pick up a starter, not an entire box of cards when they're just starting a game out. And the retail at the time was like $140 or $150, and that is just way too much for something like this, in my opinion. Now, that may be the cost of a booster box, and I wouldn't mind that, but that is not an entry-level thing. I wanted the two-player starter so I could try it out. I'm going to wait and pick it up if I can at the store whenever it does happen to show up. But initially, yeah, that was tough. So overall, vibes is cute. I think it's a reasonable game. I gotta be honest, in a world where Pokemon exists and Neopets is struggling, and that's maybe the Pudgy Penguins IP is enormous, and I've just never heard of it. But like, this one's got a tough road to hoe. But it is a decent game. Like I said, I want to try it. I will be streaming it. We'll see how it goes. I mentioned that I bought a few of the games. There were people or devs that had given me things, but this is one of the ones that I bought. This is Gundak. Editing me popping in real quick. Correction, and I quote, Gundak. Not Gundak. Gundak. which means war in the Orcish language. Official pronunciation guide in the rulebook. This is from Chaotic Great, 2 to 4 players, 15 to 30 minutes, ages 12 plus. It is a card board game? I'm not really sure how to describe that. I will say they did give me a Griff dog, which, quick anecdote here. So I was talking to the dev. It was really cool. Very excited. And I mentioned the plushies, and he ended up giving me one. They're Griff dogs. It's exactly what it sounds like. The front half is a dog, and the back half is a griffin. And they have QR codes on them, on the tags, that you scan. And spoiler alert, there's a limited amount of things on there, but it gives you a unique name for your Griff dog and a little blurb about their history. Apparently, Glimmerchirp is a bloodthirsty psychopath, which is hilarious. It's just one of those things where they built up the lore in the world of this game, which I think is really cool. Well, what is Gundak? It is a card board game combo. It's a competitive 1v1 game, although there is a 2v2 mode. Right at the outset, I gotta tell you, it is a life decking game. The goal of the game is to mill your opponent out, and we'll explain exactly how that works. Now, the cards that I'm going to put up on screen, we'll talk about them a little bit. They are square, which is unique. I had to actually go and get specific board game sleeves in order to sleeve this up. So as you can see here with the Ogre Shaman, it is a brute. It is level 2, and the different icons on there all clearly correspond to different gameplay elements. Some of the cards will do better or worse against different type lines, so you may be better against brutes, or you may get punished by brutes, for example. It is another game that has an action-based economy, therefore you are utilizing a certain number of actions each turn in order to play your cards, to utilize your cards, and ultimately outwit your opponent. As mentioned, this is a life decking game, and as such, I think it's crucial that we explain how that works, given the fact that there's actually a physical board that you move your cards around on. In order to win the game, you siege your opponent's stronghold, and to do so, you need to put one of your units in front of their castle, their center part of their back row. And then at the start of their turn, they will take a damage, and that entails milling a card from their deck. Now, we're not talking exceptionally long games. The decks themselves are only 20 cards, and you're taking 1 damage while getting sieged. Now, the base box does come with extra cards for each faction, so if you're not happy with the initial starter set, you can of course mix and match, and there are deck building rules in the rulebook itself. This is a fixed distribution game, which was music to my ears because I like the art, I like the gameplay. They have a very impressive learn-to-play video. While I was standing there waiting to speak with the dev and get a turn to do a demo, I watched the learn-to-play video, and I picked up the entire game from a learn-to-play video, which, I gotta be honest, I don't remember the last time I watched a learn-to-play, and I didn't have to, go back and reference it 90 times, because, oh yeah, well, what did they say about this, or what do you do here? This is a very simple rule set, but it does feel as though there is a lot of depth. This is one of the games that I'm most excited about, and we will 100% be streaming this IRL with my family. Quick anecdote. I bought this game on Saturday for $40. We went over to the free play area shortly thereafter and started playing it. Picked it up pretty quickly. We went back to PAX on Sunday, and before we left, my son explicitly asked me, hey, can we bring that game from yesterday to play again? Which I think speaks volumes that it immediately warranted a replay. Just like all the other games that I talked about, the links for them will be in the description if you want to check out more information about it. And just one other caveat to throw in here towards the end, while the distribution is fixed for the box set, my understanding is that there will be a pack-based system for alt art, foil cards, premium cards, that sort of thing. So if you have to scratch that itch, they got you covered. But yeah, this game is very simple to pick up. I think there's depth to it, and I think there's a lot of replayability to it. As I said, I will absolutely be streaming this. Also, for anybody out there interested, there's going to be a draftable version of the game. I don't have any idea how that works. I did not get to talk to them about it, but there's going to be drafting. I think this scratches a lot of itches and should for a lot of people. So the last game we're going to be talking about is This Game is Killer. This is not Aliens. there's some funny stories about it as I was walking past the booth, and we'll get into that. But this is a party game intended for 3 to 10 people. It's only $15, so I was going to buy it. But after speaking with the dev and doing the demo, and I was saying I was a content creator and blah, 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 they just gave me a copy. So full disclosure, I have a copy. We will be streaming it because I think my family is going to love it. But just so people have the context, they did give me one. As mentioned, this is not Alien. You are not, you're trying to survive a not xenomorph on this spaceship. The intent is you're reenacting sort of the Alien movie, the first one. And one of the descriptions of an amusing scenario, to give you the context for this, was that say you know the alien or you believe the alien is in a particular part of the ship that happens to also house some of your teammates, one or more. You could blow the airlock and kill everyone there, teammates and the alien. As you'd imagine, some players may disagree, and they would not want that to happen. So you have those scenarios. But additionally, that player could respond with playing, say, Access Tunnel, meaning they could escape if you blow the airlock. But because they escape, the alien can also use it. They can also escape, thereby prolonging the game. And somebody was correct about this decision, and somebody was incorrect. So I can see where the hilarity in this game is going to come from. And since it plays 3 to 10 people, but it only takes between 10 and 15 minutes, you can very quickly turn over games. And I'm excited about that for a variety of reasons. As you can imagine, based on my previous descriptions from other games, this fits right in, with the exception of requiring minimum 3 people. I have to see when we play it, is it possible to modify it so that we can play only 2 and then kind of go from there? Editing me here once again. We did play This Game is Killer off stream, and I have to say it's going to be very complex to try and make it simply a 2-player game. I think it absolutely is 3 to 10 players. I can see it even outside of my family circle playing the game. There'll be other people who are at least aware of Alien, and they'll want to play it. And because it is more about, it's a semi-co-op game where it's, you clearly want to survive, but you are encouraged to try and help other people survive. But because you don't have to survive, like they don't have to survive if you do, you still win. There will be some very amusing moments. So I'm looking forward to this one. We're definitely going to get it to the table. And if you want to see it played live, like I said, check out the live stream. Link for that is, of course, in the description. We're definitely going to be hitting that up, and I'm going to try and get those up on YouTube as well. Quick addendum, since we actually got some playthroughs of this game. As mentioned, I think it's going to be really tough to get it down to 2 players. You really are going to need 3 people for minimum 3 people for maximum hilarity. However, the hilarity is definitely there. I can already see the seeds of where it's going to be. Haha, I am in fact the corporate spy. You're that jerk from the Alien sequel, not Alien. But either way, there's definitely moments that as soon as you pick up the cards, you're gonna know. And it is incredibly simple to set up. The rules, I think, like as they're laid out, make it seem way more complex. But it's one of those games that once you get through the flow of it once, you're going to know it really quick. So just throwing that out there. So those are a bunch of games that I demoed or picked up or both from PAX Unplugged 2024. Let me know if you're interested in any of these or if you want me to highlight any of them in further detail. I'm absolutely going to be doing some live streams with some of these, whether it's through the digital clients, trying to set up physical streams, or we'll just rip everything to YouTube, and you'll definitely be able to check it out here on Random's Thoughts. But let me know if you were at PAX, if you saw other games, what other things you're excited about, what your thoughts are on these particular games. But that's going to do it for this time. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and tune in next time for more Random's Thoughts.